Okay, last thing before we get into some nitty gritty of writing stuff. Budgets. This is something that you do have to think about as the composer. The film studio is going to have a certain amount of money devoted to the music for the film. That means a lot of things. That means more than just your portion of it. There are other musical things that have to happen, and there's typically one budget item in their budgets for music. It says like $10,000 music. But there's a lot of different things that happen. For example, you might be writing all this, but the closing credits might be a track they just have to buy from somebody, that they want to do that. They don't have to. You could write it, but they might want to do that. It's very popular to do. So that could be a huge chunk of the budget. If that's like a big famous pop track, that could be a lot of the budget. But when it comes to budgeting, a couple things you need to think about. First of all is obviously what you're getting paid for the job. This is something you should work out with the director beforehand or the budget manager, depending on the size of the studio, whoever's in charge. Make sure you're getting what you need. We'll talk more about this at the end of this class when we talk about kind of getting gigs. But typically, for a small budget movie, you're paid by the project. So you would get a certain amount of money for the entire project. Sometimes they'll do it per completed minute of music. That's fairly rare in the film world. That's more common in the like orchestra music world. But in the film world, I have seen it done that way before. And then sometimes, this happened to me once, they just put you on salary. And they say, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars per day that you're working on this. And that was great. You actually like that to happen, because then whenever they want revisions, you're like, cool, I'll revise it. It's going to take me another 10 days. It's going to cost you another $5,000. But yeah, I'll revise for the rest of my life if you want. That's not common, but it did happen to me once, and it was great. So you need to get that figured out. The next thing you need to know about budgets is who is performing the music. Is it all electronic, or are there real instruments involved? If it's all electronic, then you might be able to do it all yourself in a program like Logic or Ableton or something like that. But that's more time that you need to put into it. So that's something you can consider when you're negotiating what you're getting paid for the project. If you're delivering the final finished music, meaning you're making it all digitally, and then you're going to hand it over, then that takes a little bit more time than just writing it. If you need to work with instrumentalists, then there's a whole bunch more things that come into it. In particular, paying the musicians. You have to budget for that, so you need to know how many musicians you need. You need to know probably what your union rate is. That'll tell you what you need to pay the musicians. So to find that out, you can search for your city and the local musicians union and find out what union rate is. That's what you have to pay them, usually per hour. So it might be like $200 per hour per musician. It can get quite expensive. Then you have to worry about the recording session. You're going to have to book studio time. You're going to have to do all of those things, and that's going to be expensive. You may also need to worry about sheet music. Actually, you will. You will need to have to worry about sheet music, preparing that. That takes time and money. I mean, paper is not free, but it has to get done. So all of those things need to come together, and you need to factor those in a way that at least makes sure that the musician fees, the recording fees, and the sheet music fees do not come out of your salary for the project. If they're reluctant to give you a number and say, okay, we'll devote this much money to hiring musicians. If they don't want to do that, just say, okay, well, hiring musicians doesn't come out of my contract, right? Like, I get paid a certain amount, and then you have to hire the musicians. That can be okay, as long as it's not expected to come out of your pocket. That's the only thing you need to be absolutely sure that you're on the same page about. So keep that in mind when you approach a new project. Okay, let's move on and start getting into the nitty-gritty of the types of film music and what goes into it.